I know this sounds very crazy, the idea that someone who complains about their job constantly would, have some kind of standards in terms of what work he's willing to do. But I think it makes a lot of sense when you consider that I'm someone who doesn't want to waste their time, and I'm not going to take on a job that I know I'm not suited for. I have a friend, a colleague, a companion, who suggested that I should maybe consider becoming a police officer. I oftentimes will see the different branches of law enforcement around my area with their now hiring signs. And I explained to him as best I could that, look, I know that more often than not, most days, cops are just, they're driving around, they're, patrolling, making sure people follow whatever procedural stuff, whether that's traffic laws and, just most days are not the big heavy shootouts or violent encounters that you would see on an episode of The Cops. But I know that if you stay in a job like that for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, the chances and the likelihood of running into days like that are going to increase. And I've never been comfortable with the idea that I am going to potentially give my life in the pursuit of keeping some strangers safe. Now, I made fun, or rather insulted, the Uvalde police officers when they had that shooting about 3 years ago over there in Texas at that elementary school or preschool. But I made comments derogatory of them and insulted them because I feel like officers, when they take their oaths, when they, sign up for the job, they know what they're supposed to do. That part of being a police officer is putting your safety at the background, or as rather the least important thing compared to that of others, right? You're supposed to protect other people, protect and serve. And with them sitting there and letting this madman shoot up these school children while they all stood in the hallway and did nothing, I really just, was grossed out. But I said, that's why for me, if I know ahead of time that that's not something I'm willing to do, then I'm not going to bother pursuing that job. Now, I did a video about two extremes where I talked about how, my current job only gives me one shift a week. And then this other place was talking about, 9 to 8 Monday through Friday. And then there's also a half shift on Saturday. And, I was, again, it's one of those things where I get where someone who's an outsider looks at it and says, this guy must be crazy. Why would he turn in a job that's willing to give him that many hours, especially if he was complaining about his current one, barely giving him any at all. But see, we go back to that same issue, because what was that job? Well, I was applying to it under the belief that it was customer service, right? So someone, works inside an office or some building and they either, call people or they, sell things. But what this really is a canvassing job where they want you to knock on doors to promote, whatever product they're selling. And, I'm someone whose only experience with canvassing was when I ran for the House last year. So somebody would say, oh, well, you know how to do this. You've been through the rigors of knocking on doors, not knowing what to expect, whatever. But here's the catch. I only canvassed, or I guess knocked on doors during the day, right? I started probably like 10, 11 in the morning and then end at 5, 6 p.m., around like the dinner time, during when the sun was still up. These crazy bastards want someone to knock on 80 to 100 doors in 4 hours, right? 1 to 4 p.m. And then come back and knock on those same doors from 5 to 8 p.m. And I even said during the interview they gave me, I asked, well, wait, so you want us to knock on doors at night by ourselves? Because I had heard that sometimes they send 2 people or 3 people together. But it turns out that when they send people together, they only do that as a way to make sure all 80 or 100 or whatever of the doors are knocked on. And the manager I spoke to explained that you'll have someone on the other street while you're knocking on stuff. And to me, that didn't suffice, because I said, hell, somebody could, react badly to me, whatever you can interpret that to be. And then by the time the other person I'm with can respond to it, I'm already deceased or, attacked or whatever. They basically, they're so far away that them being there would not stop anything in the immediate. And when that happened, and, just kind of like thinking about the job over those few days where I was testing them out, I really, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So, I'm not going to say I'm some perfect employee. But when a job puts me out of my comfort zone, and not even like comfort zone in the way of, having to talk to people or, just like maybe being outside, being inside, etc. I'm talking specifically if I feel that I could potentially have severe bodily harm from this type of job or this type of work, I don't plan on doing it. Because it was like the hours were already so rigorous. Like I was explaining to my friend, I said, usually when you work a job from, 11 or 10 hours a day, right? They're talking about 9 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, with some hour long lunch break in between. It's supposed to be that the shift is that long so that you only have to work 4 days because you're already meeting the 40 hours in those excessive 4 days of work. But because they're, insane, they try to give you 2 extra days on top of it. It's I'm not interested in working 50 or 60 hours a week. You can call me lazy. I'm good. But I said, it's one of those jobs where they also throw in the part of you need to sell a certain number of things a day. And that's also an issue to me because that means your employment is contingent on someone else's decision. Now, of course, when you apply for a job, you know that the people that are working there already have the choice to hire you, fire you, etc. But it shouldn't be your fault if other people are not buying something that that your company is selling, especially if it's something that people already have. Like if I'm going around selling the internet, for example, well, hell, 80 something percent of the world has internet, like the overwhelming majority. So it's going to be difficult to sell that to people when it's in such hot commodity. But again, it's like I don't take an issue with the job for like one specific thing or another. It's just all those factors together of the hours are being like just ridiculous, along with this quota and having to knock on doors at night. All that stuff together made me just back out of it. And clearly I wasn't the only one that felt that way, because I still see them posting help wanted signs, because what it is that people are signing up for it and then they're finding out more about it and then they're like, all right, never mind. That's why I did the video Deceptive Job Listings, because when I applied for that job, all I knew was that it was customer service. They said nothing about canvassing. They said nothing about you need to sell this much of this to stay employed here. They said nothing about it's a full-time job. By full-time, we actually mean it's damn near overtime, or it's 50 hours plus a week. None of this stuff was communicated. And that's done on purpose so that when you get up there and, after driving however many miles to meet them in person, they can reveal all of this at the last second. And then you feel even stupider for not going along with it, because it's like, look how much time you've invested in them already. So it's just a matter of all of it being either something I'm not comfortable with from, what I think could happen to me, or something I don't think I can do. And most stuff, if you give me training, I feel confident enough to at least try. But with the amount of hours and just the types of things that these, whether it's being an officer or going and knocking on people's doors at night, I'm good. So you can keep calling me lazy, but I'm open to most jobs, just not this stuff where I feel, like outside and alone and, in some possible higher capacity of harm.